Item was placed on the agenda because the council funded a number of specified buckets of funding for consultant services around three particular plans. It was the bike master plan for the city.
Do you want that on an easel or something?
Maybe
I can
so.
go get one.
Is that okay for the? What's that? Yeah, no, we can't put that there.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, no, Jack.
I'll use that as a prop.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the bike master plan, form-based. Thank you.
How are you? You're doing well.
Form-based code for particular corridors or portions of the city, and then the urban greenway completion plan was the third piece of that. And as has been in city plans for many years in various forms and locations, and I assume the stack of reports you have there, you mentions it in one spot or another.
In a variety.
Yeah, is what's, I guess, in some cases called the Salisbury Crescent, in other cases the Urban Greenway, but it seems to me that without actually funding the completion of that work, we'll never complete it. So we have to finalize the planning, and that was council's intent, and that was the basis of our discussions and our support for that work a few months ago. That being said, here we are 14 years since this diagram was shown without a plan for a particular path for the final elements of the Greenway, or an order in which we would complete the various pieces, or a prospective cost. So all of that remains unanswered, which again was the purpose of trying to develop a final plan that linked to the city's documents for completed work, our budget and our capital improvement plan. So I don't know, other than sort of adding to the scope and clarity of that work, I don't know, if you have anything to add.
Just a little bit for background. The page in front of you, which had been put together by my predecessor, the date on that 2001, just had the concept, and that's entirely what it was. And we know that sort of an origin and destination. You have, Pemberton on one side and the Ward Museum on the other. Just prior to this very, schematic drawing being done, we had found a board in the office that was behind Keith's door that was put together by Salisbury Public Works, thank you very much, in 1998. And it is not as if nothing has happened, because there's various pieces on there that certainly have happened. Pieces of the Riverwalk had been done, some work out in the park, which I'm less familiar with, but some trails out there. But there are clearly some of the more difficult bottlenecks or just hurdles to get over, as you saw with the design of 13 in the last discussion, and then on some work on the west side of the river as well. We need to address those impediments if we're ever going to get this thing to work. Along the way, I think one thing, Mr. President and Keith has worked very closely with the MPO on the hiker-biker plan. What's the word I'm missing? Functional master plan. And that is copied and included as well as another one of the documents that this references. So we've got a lot of different pieces. Some work has been done, but a couple key gaps, and we can really make it work.
Excellent.
And I think one of the purposes of this is to take all these pieces and marry them together. And not only marry them together, but come up with some type of sequencing order that makes sense with other city CIP projects, as well as real cost estimates. So then the city council and the administration can look at them and start figuring out how to program them into your capital budget.
I mean, the simple truth is that without the exercise of saying, here are the gaps, here is what a recommended solution for those gaps will be, and here is the appropriate sequence or recommended sequence and cost. What we're going to do is continue to sit around, for years to come, coffee shops or, in our neighborhoods or at dinner and say, yeah, we should really do that. The city should really do it, somebody should really do that. And the fact of the matter is, it won't get done unless we begin this process now.
And it'll be an approach that's not very well connected, looking at not only this area, but looking how it integrates into the region, like Mr. Lennox was stating, going out to Pemberton Drive, going down to the Northeast Collector Trail, and then points there on after. So
I
it's
think,
about time.
I think from an economic standpoint, the other thing we have to keep in mind is wherever there are projects that are in the works, if we could jump and tie them in, obviously as we did with the stormwater and the cable, there's usually tremendous savings if you can leverage those things. So there are a bunch of things that are happening simultaneously, and it may look like there is no organization, but I think it's our job to make sure that wherever we can leverage one of those things, we do.
Right, it's
I
even worse
agree.
than doing nothing, or, as we've been haphazardly doing pieces of it, as you pointed out, is somehow stumbling upon doing something that actually impedes this, where we're trying to correct one problem and we had an opportunity to contribute and we impede it,
Or a missed
imposed
opportunity.
an impediment or missed an
Missed
opportunity.
opportunity.
Missed opportunities, and I think, going back to Mr. Heath's comment, look at just the cost of mobilization when you're starting to do any repaving jobs or anything of that nature, or
Exactly.
stormwater management. If we've already got them in the city, let's try to make sure we've identified every capital project that's
That is
currently
associated with
funded
it. That's exactly
that we
right.
could take every advantage of.
And the potential, I think the potential donation of this land between the Feldman's property and the river that we've discussed and that has been on council agenda and is waiting, for that process to continue. I think there's a logical starting point. I mean, that is a central gap in the network and is somewhere that we can easily fill, I believe.
Sure. I guess from a strategy standpoint, we have to figure out what sort of expertise or community involvement we need, because I'll venture to say any of us, we all drive on 13, we all cross Main Street on 13. How the heck do you get from the park to downtown? I mean, that is, if that one spot we could figure out, and I'm not sure if we put an RFP out and have people bid on it and spend money, there may be enough knowledge or good ideas, or somehow if we get that together. It was interesting listening to Mr. Brewer say that you can't paint state roads. I mean, there's lots of thoughts about painting that intersection, somehow to slow it down and to get folks across. But between the river and the railroad tracks and the vehicles, it's tough. But that is one of the major impediments that I referred to earlier.
Sure.
So how you want us to handle that money that you put into basically a contractual account? I'm not sure, but we need to have some.
Well, there was some speculation about how much we would apportion to each of those three projects that I mentioned, and I think even in the budget, it might offer a figure, but I think, what we need to know is the scope, or what we need to offer you is the scope, so that we can work together to figure out what services may be achieved in-house and what services are needed.
Right.
So I see there as being a few specific needs. One is the planning need, which is beginning to figure out the overall network and missing links. So identifying those gaps and through some broad planning, which I think the area where there will be question about alignment, or the areas, I guess, are going to be one, at 13, and two, between Parsons Road or Fitzwater and Pemberton Park. And I think those are really the only two. The others are pretty straightforward. But there are gaps other than those two. Then I think we would need assistance figuring out the cost, maybe alternatives of each of those. And then I think some sort of recommendation on phasing or sequencing. I mean, those are, I think, the four critical questions. And maybe there's a community engagement or outreach component as well, particularly on the Pemberton side, the west side.
Yep.
I mean, what else is missing? Am I missing anything in terms of?
I have no thoughts right now.
Because I'm looking at this green, and you said this was done in 2001.
This one, yeah, this
Because
diagram.
Theater's no longer,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, this appears in drawings from the
Everywhere.
70s. Yeah.
And I keep
Forever.
thinking that we're discussing this to get the total understanding what you want to do. I keep talking about this, and I don't know if it's gonna come or not. Big goal setting session. I mean,
The
this
what?
is. Goal setting session.
Oh, okay.
Because it seems
I
like
just-
this is one of the goals we want to accomplish, get the full understanding of what we're trying to do. I guess
That
you're
wasn't
trying,
sort
what
of-
I'm trying to see, in my interpretation, is you're trying to link these areas together to make it an even path.
And that's always been.
That's what you're trying to do.
And I-
Exactly.
I'm thinking that's the
And filling in
understanding I
any
got, yeah,
gaps
and filling in
that we
gaps.
have.
All right, I'm not totally, dumb. But I'm just saying that it's something that I think that just discussing this in, 10, 15 minutes, it's not enough time.
No, I think, I disagree, actually. I think we don't need 10
You
or
don't need
15 minutes.
You
I don't
it's
think we do.
done? Okay,
This is something that's been discussed for 40 years.
for how many years?
40 years.
40 years.
And I think it's a mistake to,
that
to
long?
spend, I do, I think it's a mistake to spend more time discussing the merit, which is why we didn't. This is why we funded getting it done.
We didn't
fund-
do it.
This is why we funded a plan now to
We
get it
didn't
done.
do it.
You know, this is one of those things where it's exactly what you're saying, linking, you know, linking the east and west sides of the city through the city. We've got maybe 60% of the projects completed associated with it. The last one, you know, elements, you know,
But-
even being completed recently on, I would consider the Lot 12, you know, living shoreline and potential for a continuation of the Riverwalk there as a continuation of the unanswered question of the Salisbury Urban Greenway. I think the question now is, in what order do we do it?
I got a question then. I have no problem with what you just said. In these studies and them books and stuff, did they do a community outreach discussion?
Every planning document's got some level of public participation.
So if
Really,
pub-
what's gonna drive that is the amount of funding the city's looking to put towards that
Yeah,
initiative
because
or
if
that
the
component.
community outreach has already been done, 40 years worth of community outreach, what we need to do is just put it, to me,
Well, there are changes over time, and
Yeah,
whatever you're
well-
doing from a planning perspective, it's highly advisable that before you go out and start looking to program or implement it, that there
because
is
see, some
community,
people may
there is
want to
some level of
change.
community
See, somebody
buy-in.
might not agree with
I
what
think
you're
there's
doing.
an overall general direction. It's how do you go from 60,000 foot conceptual
Right.
to 30,000 foot to really giving the administration, the council a plan that they can implement consistent with the recommendations that's in the comprehensive plan that you adopted.
I think, yeah, and I think the area where there's gonna be real question, for residents
Pemberton.
to weigh in, it's going to be, how do you connect Pemberton Hall
Right.
to Parsons Road or Fitzwater Street?
Yeah.
How do you get people through that corridor? And there are, you know, a couple different answers there, but you're really gonna need the residents and people on that side of town to weigh in, all the way from, you know, Harbor Point, all the way to, again, Fitzwater Street.
And that's good justification because really that was a missed opportunity for a discussion that probably should have taken place in the mid-'80s.
Yep.
That's what I'm gonna say.
Before all that development occurred,
That's
because
what I'm
once
gonna
you've
say.
got a
I'm thinking
built
like the
environment,
development,
it becomes even
That's
more
what I'm thinking
challenging.
is, yeah.
However, if we get out ahead of it now, hopefully we'll be
That's-
able to reduce
I'm
those
thinking the same
challenges.
thing.
That's where I think.
That's the
you'll need input.
justification.
Yeah, okay.
If you don't get a handle on it at this point, you're just gonna see more piecemeal
Because I mean, you'd be walking through
development, and it's
people's
gonna be more
backyards.
difficult to get.
Yes.
And you're gonna see more piecemeal bike and pedestrian amenities because the connectivity is gonna be too,
Yeah.
either financially not feasible or it's gonna be constrained from property and utilities.
And I think it's worth saying that to some extent, this, I think, could be or portions of this could be a subsidiary or secondary project to the bike master plan that we also funded at the same time. Because I think part of this network, particularly the west side part, is also likely bicycle infrastructure.
That's right.
I mean, so-
Bicycle paths don't know jurisdictional lines.
Well, yes, yeah, that's true. and
That's
you're right.
key.
Some of this is in the city,
That's
some of it's
key.
out, that we're
Right.
talking about. And other gaps are really more Riverwalk gaps or are decidedly, the conversation was for us in State Highway because it's Route 13.
Yes.
So The three large missing pieces are really very different conversations. But ultimately, I think we need something to tie them together to say, you know, that linkage, that east-west linkage is what you're trying to achieve, which answers the big goal question, oriented question that Shaney's referencing. And I think, you know, so maybe perhaps this is done in concert with that bike master planning process.
Yeah.
And I hate to be repetitive, but I still think that one of the things that has to drive this are current projects or associated projects that we could leverage. And there are many that are going to be happening. And I think that would be, when we ask what order should we do it, we should do it in the order that gives us the best leverage.
Agreed.
And I also think, looking at it from a broader perspective, also projects that State Highway or Wycomico County
Right.
or any of our other partners are
Right.
doing at the same time.
Right. Well, goes back to communication and involvement.
Excellent. So, I don't know if I have helped to add clarity, or if we've helped to add clarity at all to your, to the question here, which is what services are needed, and, you know, how do we shape an RFP? How are you feeling, Jack?
Well, I'll look to Mr. Stevenson for some guidance on this. However, perhaps what you're saying is that pool of money that you mentioned before, do we do this RFP first with various components to see what the price might be? If it comes back really high, you decide to do more in-house, because I know you want that money to stretch for some other projects as well.
Well, two of the three, yes, we're talking about. The third is really separate and
Yes, it
distinct.
is.
So perhaps it's kind of a,
But the third, if we're talking about somehow with the zoning, you know, that can expand and contract
Sure.
as well, depending on your resources. If this is a priority, then we work with
I think these
procurement on
two
this.
projects are, will have a more significant impact, and so the bike master plan and the urban greenway completion plan, I think are the first two that I would recommend undertaking, but, you know,
Well, sure.
again, I also look to your
Sure.
department and your,
Can I make a recommendation? I think maybe we do a combined RFP with several different line items or alternatives, requesting consultant pricing to make sure we can get the Pinto model and the Cadillac model and know whatever comes in between. And then we can bring that back to council and evaluate it, see where your budget lies, see where your council can set their priorities. And from that point, we can kind of plan out a roadmap moving forward. Until that time, I think it's all speculation of how much the urban greenway costs versus the continuation of, you know, any bicycle functional master plan. And I think if you have the information in front of you, it'll allow you to make an educated decision.
and it seems to me that we at least need some urban design and landscape architecture
Yes.
guidance on most of these projects, and transportation, or, you know, bicycle transportation consultants, and I'm sure there's someone in the room who can weigh in on that, and maybe a couple people who offer some insight.
Volunteer.
You think? Who can volunteer and offer.
Volunteers.
So I think as far as a path forward, you know, perhaps, once you feel that you have that RFP crafted, and maybe council can see it or weigh in on it.
Oh, absolutely. I'd want council endorsement, or I'd recommend council endorsement before we advertise it to make sure whatever's in the scope is accurate to what your expectations, to meeting your expectations and needs.
And the other city agencies as well, clearly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Mr. Molds or Ms. Pollock had anything to weigh in on in what we're discussing here.
Well, we have another meeting coming up undoubtedly, so go ahead.
Well, I think what Councilman Day mentioned, our biggest, from an engineering perspective, is that those routes and getting that connectivity. 13 being one of the biggest ones. I haven't quite figured out how to do that, and so that'll be the challenge that we'll be looking at, is how to get that connectivity in there.
So, Mr. Stevenson, you mentioned another meeting.
We'll pull staff together, we'll talk about an combined RFP, we'll
Okay.
figure out how to go from there.
And I guess at some point, you know, that relationship with State Highway, if we can engage them again, and, you know, it sounds as if from today's conversation, there are some things that will be complicated in terms of not being able to paint or striping in the way that we might want to. There are some other things that I think can be really beneficial in terms of sequencing of projects in such a way so we don't end up with another situation where they're spending years doing construction and there's this overlaying district of, or overlaying, surface work that could have happened simultaneously that didn't for whatever reason years ago, and we end up in a similar situation where we're gonna have to tear up the street again if we want to get that work done and inconvenience people, and that's going to be something none of us is going to be happy about. So I think that relationship in this conversation is really important. That state highway relationship.
So noted.
Yeah, that came to mind when they said that the stormwater was gonna go all the way down to the Route 50 bridge, and I'm thinking, man, are we missing an opportunity, or Route 50 intersection, are we missing an opportunity there for that cross connection?
The answer is yes.
Main Street? And is there something that we could do about it at this point? I mean, it's gonna be a while before they get down there, but these things are not.
But if the
planned
design and
right.
engineering's already
Yeah.
completed, that's
Yeah.
where, if we all knew what was being worked on at any given time, we would probably reevaluate our own work programs
Right.
to make sure they were consistent. Continued conversations.
Okay, so planning department's going to go back to crafting an RFP, working through the city administrator, and you'll be roping Public Works into that as well. Excellent.
Correct.
Thank you all.
Great.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Is there anything else behind your door?
You have to come down and see sometime.
I guess I
We'd like to have
All
the
kinds of good
conversation-
maps and good boards, all kinds of
Good
stuff.
maps.
We'd like to have the conversation about where the missing link is, that we didn't know about that in advance, that we didn't have the time to do that, how can we make that improvement with MPO, the city, the county, the state,
Well,
that we don't miss those.
that is one thing, and I hate
So-
to take up time, but the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization right now, is conducting a sidewalk pedestrian connectivity study. And one of the main focuses of that study is going to be identifying the gaps, as well as making recommendations for jurisdictions to consider about prioritizing as it relates to gaps that are within school zones. So that should be coming out within the next 8 to 9 months. Fortunately, there is really good coordination between the cities, towns, county, and the Metropolitan Planning Organization, with our representation here on the council, as well as on the Technical Advisory Committee with the City Public Works. So that is one environment where the right hand is talking to the left hand, and we're making sure that our work programs reflect that.
Yeah.
It sounds like maybe the state piece is not.
We're working closely with the state as well. I think what you saw today was an example of that. That was part of a study funded back in 2011. It just takes time to get the design, engineering, and the funding to make the capital improvement in place. So we'll continue to work with the State Highway Administration, the Maryland Department of Transportation, as well as the cities and towns to make sure, again, that we can coordinate whatever is possible to try to maximize our investments.
I can't claim that I know the whole story as to why, those two things weren't as to why the improvements to Route 13, including median trees, streetscaping, things like that, didn't happen simultaneously, but I can tell you, it's not like somebody didn't do their job.
No.
As a community, that got defeated, that got beat, and we let go of that because there was opposition.
No, I'm talking
10
about,
years ago.
I'm talking about right now, crossing over from Main Street to the park, making that connection from downtown to the park. They're coming all the way down 13 with those stormwater
Right.
drains. They're gonna be tearing up the road. They're gonna be doing all those things that maybe whatever it is that's gonna work there, whatever miracle we find, maybe in that planning process, we missed an opportunity to look at and combine that project.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next item on our agenda is back to the Mike Mold Show. Ms. Rolls. So this is accepting a donation from the Eastern Shore International Mountain Biking Association chapter.
Yes, we've been talking to Eastern Shore International Mountain Biking Association, or ESIMBA. I sort of think that came in second place for the bear name. But they've submitted a proposed plan for purchasing and installing bike trail directional cautionary and informational signage in the city park, in the mountain biking trails that are there. It's part of the memorandum of understanding that the city has with Asimba, that they were allowed to develop these trails and provide these signage that will help people move around and utilize the trails because they have different levels of difficulty. So they came up with a plan. They approached the Department of Public Works, and they also came to the Parks Committee meeting to review their proposals. I think they've been to two meetings, I believe they've come. Our last meeting, they actually dragged the wood kiosk and brought it. We looked out in the street and it showed their workmanship to that. So they pulled that together, and in the packet they provided you was the map, which I've brought here, outlining where the locations of the kiosks would be. And then within the trail system, there'll be these I guess directional, and also show the name of the trail and where turns are as far as the carcinite posts that would be put up along that way. And I showed an example in the packet there. So what they're looking for is there's already a memorandum of understanding for doing this. They're going to provide the materials and the labor to do the installation, the donation accepted by the city for moving ahead with that. One of the things that brought it to a little bit more of a priority is they had some discussion with the Department of Health, and there's a grant opportunity there for buying the materials. And they need to get that going because that is a deadline of September 18th for expending the funds. So at meeting that schedule, they'll be able to buy that stuff and then the installation. Mike Perry's here. Yep.
Do you have anything to add? Do you want to come up? Or Mr., I don't know if Mr. Drew is with you.
One change is we started working with the Eastern Shore Runners Club as well, and we had a fundraiser right across the street, and it went very well, so we have some additional funding. In addition to our kiosks that show the internal trails, we added to our map the external greenway, and they would like to have a runner's kiosk down closer to the Snow Hill Road end of the park, which would have a more expanded view of all those. So we've already talked to them. It will be a collaboration between the runners, the walkers, the cyclists, everybody, people who ride bikes.
There was some discussion of that at the last Parks Committee meeting because that was sort of outside of the memorandum of understanding. We didn't have any problem with moving ahead with that, but we wanted to coordinate that as a separate donation. Okay. Because their kiosk location was a little different in terms of where the starting points were for the running versus the mountain bike trail.
So we want to do the kiosks and the carcinite posts for the internal trails first, and the kiosks will be at the dog park. Let's see, North Park Drive.
Dog park.
Right.
Baseball field.
Baseball field.
Yep. And then the scout field, trailhead.
Right.
Side here.
And then Beagland Park.
Yep.
Okay. Just on signage, Mr. Drew, do you mind coming forward?
And there are designated parking areas.
5 different signage projects.
We talked to Ward Museum, and they agreed to let us use that as a parking area so we can steer people away from some of the residential side street parking areas.
Okay. So I think the signage and the internal trails, and especially given that you guys are doing the hard work, I think it's fantastic. What I want to make sure of is we've got a grant that we've pursued from the state for signage for bikeways throughout, or for all of our bike infrastructure throughout the city. We've got a potential signage at the upper levels, which is signed as currently in a couple spots as Urban Greenway, and which we've just talked about. We've got this bike master plan we're talking about, which could result in some recommendations on wayfinding. We've got the Main Street master plan wayfinding signage coming. I want to make sure that all of this is the same language.
Yeah, the way we looked at the.
And I'm looking for a point person who's going to be the, the gatekeeper who says, this will be the pattern, this will be the language, and all of this can work within.
The Department of Public Works would be the gatekeeper in terms of the different, because we'll oversee a lot of these projects. The way we looked at this one with the mountain bike, because it was very, I don't want to call it, not rural, but backwoods kind of thing. Off-road, that's a
We
very
did
good one.
discuss all this, the
Yeah.
verbiage and the color coding that is used in state and national parks. So
Right.
we've followed that so far. And we were just sitting back there talking about, we were just discussing the Pemberton to Salisbury Trail with Mark Cotter. I talked to him on Friday. We've talked about this. We're all connected pretty much. So we are, and we try to bring this to the meeting because I'm on the City Parks Committee.
So the stuff you'll see between the bikeway and the main street, because it's more of an urban, a kiosk wouldn't work with something like that. You have more of a pillar type stand. And so I think it's a little different environment. Because they're up in where the mountain bike trails, you want something a little more durable and fitting with the natural environment kind of thing.
Which is
So the
why-
brown Carsonite posts are 4 inches wide.
Exactly.
They're flat fiberglass. You hit them, they just kind of bend over and come back up.
And I think where it makes sense, we're not going to invent new standards. We're going to use more likely MUTC standards for the wayfaring signs for street. But as Mike said, you would use probably National Park Service standards for the trail signage. So,
I guess what I would ask is that, we look to, the best communities in terms of wayfinding, they have Alphon, they have, a sizing system that, works at the pedestrian scale, at the, highway scale, at the biking scale. They have, a set of colors. Everything has, some either, base shape or color. If you basically take MUTCD, it's that same sort of concept and apply it to a community, community's wayfinding pattern book, essentially. That's what I think we need. And I don't know the right way to achieve it in these. And I'm sorry to be bringing this up right now, and I know it sounds like nitpicking.
One system you could look at is Washington DC has the Custis Trail, W&OD Trail, and then the C&O Canal Trail. They have a system of marking all of that, and a map system. It's all online. You can find it. So that would be one representative. You might have
that's a
other
good
ideas.
example. I was in Boulder 2 weeks ago, and they have a similar system, but they all, the graphic of the sign is MUTC based.
It is.
It really is, yeah.
based
Yeah,
on MUTCD.
and you can find your way around, use them. You don't have to know anything about it.
Well, and frankly, I don't think it changes anything about this donation, this
Right.
gift, because this makes
Right.
perfect sense.
But it's a good conversation to have because we've been sitting in the back taking notes and talking about, well, we need to bring this up and when should we do that and all that. So,
Let's do it now.
yeah, now's a good time.
Yeah, now is always the best time.
So do we look to develop that graphic now or decide on those colors? Not now, but I mean,
Well, so we've got this grant that we are in receipt of or have applied for.
Yeah, so we have the grant, an RFP has gone out for consultants. Proposals have been received, and it may or may not have been awarded, but if it hasn't been awarded, it will soon be awarded, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah, a lot of what was driving us in terms of moving ahead, and that obviously was timing, was the Main Street Master Plan was sort of going to be the standard setter. What was chosen in terms of benches and signage and all those kind of things would set it. And then rolling that into how we went forward. And the timing will be good with both of those projects coming with the wayfinding with the bikes, that we can roll the fonting, the coloring, the Salisbury standard into that kind of thing.
Yeah, can we ensure that there are elements that we can take from that Main Street Master Plan and apply to
Exactly.
our bicycle infrastructure, and then
Right.
from that apply to our, park trail infrastructure? And, each of them will probably have elements that make them distinct and unique, and maybe that's, extracted from MUTCD, maybe the green or the brown coloration.
Right.
The particular shapes and all of that, but I think there are also elements like logos and, things like that will make it Salisbury unique.
Well, if you notice the kiosk, we had discussions with the kiosk on what else was on there, where they have a city representation on that.
Right.
And
This is
even
not the
if we're
final
doing-
map, but it does have the word, the words Salisbury City Park Trail System. And what was the final plan? Were we going to use the official Salisbury logo on the top?
There, we were back and forth on that in terms of, that was the
It says Eastern
default,
Shore
is what we
Inland, then it
had.
has Bike SPY and Eastern Shore Running Club.
And we talked about putting it in the kiosk itself, like routering it.
Right, that was
That
it. It
was
was
it,
going to be
yeah.
routed in the wood of the kiosk top. That's right.
So,
So we'll say Salisbury City Park
Yeah, so-
Trail System, I think.
Right.
Nice.
At an additional cost.
Well,
Yeah.
You had
You know-
volunteers.
It kept going, it kept going. The cost keeps getting higher, but we're doing well. And the Runner Club is also going for the grant, the
Department of Health, yeah.
Department of Health grant. So we're both going for that. And apparently we have a really good shot at it because nobody else could meet the deadline. It was like one of those instant deadline ones. And we had just written the grant for something else and we were ready. We did it.
Good.
We appreciate it. And if you need anything else from us, just let us know. In the meantime, I think
Okay.
the question is there council consensus for, to support the acceptance of this donation
Yes.
for signs?
Yes.
Yeah, I do have just a couple of comments. First of all, I'm disappointed you didn't drag the kiosk in here for us.
It was out in the street. They didn't get it in the
Okay,
building.
Okay, well, we'll provide a break, but, no, I like it a lot, and I really like your logo with the little crab in the middle and the bicycle chain, that's really cool. The one question that I did have about the kiosk itself, being open-faced like that, is there an additional cost, I'm
Worried
sure?
about,
People putting things
defacing.
up, people tagging,
what it is.
and protection of whatever you have
It will
on
be
there.
behind plexiglass.
That
It will be
was-
screwed down.
that
And we've
was-
even discussed tamper-proof screws, so I'm looking into that. It will not be something that you could just rip apart, because we realized that, we talked about a single leg, and we said, no, that makes it easier to rock it. That was
Right.
Doug Draper Senior's first comment, wasn't make it 2 legs, because they're gonna try to pull it down the first time they see it.
Right,
So-
we're gonna sit on it. and
So
run on it.
we've gone through all that. It has a single roof that leans forward
Right.
like that. There will be a pocket for small fold-out, maybe tri-fold or do-fold.
Brochure kind of thing.
Brochures, maps, things that people could take with them. And they'll have information about the local police and all that stuff.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was my only concern, was the exposure of the signs, and that we put them up there and they're nice and pretty, and go through a season and you can't read them
It's a
anymore.
laminated sign. It's a
Yeah,
really
each
high-quality
of the
sign.
maps would be laminated, so
Yeah.
they'll have that, and then have the cover over top of
Yeah.
it, so you don't
Yeah.
get that
Together,
water
that'll
stain.
work. I don't
Yep.
know.
Quite a bit like the Pemberton Park ones, but theirs is a larger kiosk. I think ours is 4 feet wide and theirs might be 6, or, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Very
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Johnson's Pond Homes. Mr. Molds, to get you.
Didn't we have the
Oh,
tree-
I'm sorry, wastewater treatment plant easement for underground power lines first.
Yep. Are you gonna take five?
After this.
Okay.
After this we can. We're actually running late.
Yeah, this, just to help along the, here's a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish.
Well, yeah, being in
The,
Vermont this past week and having so many shots be ruined by power lines, it's like, why don't we just bury all these?
Well, this is one of those things where you've heard of the butterfly effect. We had an issue last year where the light poles for the Little League Park, they were rotted and they had to come down. So the league approached us and they had a contractor to do it. We helped them take the lights down. Well, the ospreys were using those poles to nest in them. So thinking ahead, we built a stand for the ospreys that they could move over there. Nice, cute stand, you know, we thought that'd be great. Well, the little buzzards decided that they would like to use the power poles instead. I don't know if it was a view thing or what. We tried taking some trees down. We were consulting with an expert with Delmarva who handles this kind of stuff, and she was giving a lot of ideas. You'll see in the picture, if you can look at it, up at the top of the poles, they installed like a V that would go over the wood to try to help, so the branches wouldn't hold. Well, they would come and they'd still drop the branches would hit the 2 lines and it would arc and the power goes out. It cost us about $600 an hour to run our generator. So it was a big concern. At some point, things go fluey and then we got a problem out there. They since have then gone and eliminated, there was a double piece of wood that was between the pole to try to do that. They've gone to a single one with fiberglass, again, to try to discourage these birds. So it's somewhat helped much, but we're sort of at the end of the nesting season. So they've given up trying, at least for this year. So the concern is now what we want to do is to go from the Delmarva pole, which is the smaller one, to that is our pole, and take it underground. So once it gets to that pole, it's underground and it's not our problem anymore, and you've eliminated those aspects for the Ospreys to do that. So Delmarva, in order to obtain that easement for that underground thing, requires this easement agreement, which is provided.
You say it's not our problem anymore, but it's still our problem if the power goes out because they've nested in the other pole, right?
But they'll have to take those kind of measures, and at some point, you've got to have a pole before you drop it. The space between the Delmarva pole and our pole is our line, and then we had the responsibility, we were actually paying Delmarva to come in and fix our problem.
In addition to the $600 an hour.
Yeah. So they've been very cooperative. I will say Delmarva has been very proactive in coming out. They've consulted. Basically, you have a lot of human beings trying to figure out how to outsmart two birds.
And the birds are winning.
Birds two, us nothing.
Well, I don't know what the gophers will do, but the birds might get beaten on this one.
So, so Mike, you look for council to move the easement to the legislative session?
That's correct.
All right. Is there council consensus?
Yes.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
You need a break?
No, maybe we'll do the next one.
I think everybody does.
No?
We've been here
Next
for
one.
We are.
half hours.
Oh, wow.
Okay. How quickly can we do the next one?
Well, the next, well, Julia's got half of it, and my half's pretty straightforward.
Village vote?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're outside.
All right.
Oh,
And
we're
then
gonna do
that
that.
one's gonna be a while, so if you,
What's that?
Said that one's gonna be a while.
you'll be a little while for that
All
one.
right, we'll take a
Okay.
break. We'll take 5 minutes.
All right.
5 minutes.
That's actually Osprey and Mr. Maloney.
That's gonna be.
Well, we'll give